Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here. Hope you're staying safe. Hope that you're taking the necessary precautions as recommended. And I hope you're doing well and faring the weather, as they say, during these, again, really weird times in the world. I'm doing the best I can to maintain the routines that I still can. I, having grown up in a really small town, feel like I can weather having to be inside with nothing to do a lot easier than maybe people I know that have grown up in bigger cities. So I'm doing everything I can to maintain, and the one thing I'm doing is podcasting, and I'm very thankful that I have the setup ready to be able to do podcasts from my apartment. And today's is a really great one. I'm really excited for today's episode. My guest on the show today is a musician and the lead singer of Blind Adam and the Federal League, Adam Gogola. Adam reached out to me a few months ago after I did my episode with Chris Dose and Justin Sane from Anti-Flag, saying that he really enjoyed the episode. And his band, who I had not been aware of before he reached out to me, they have a new record planned for release that's coming out on AF Records, and he was kind enough to send it to me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed their previous stuff that I listened to when we started chatting, and in anticipation of this upcoming podcast, he sent me their new record that was produced by Chris Dose from Anti-Flag. So we do talk a little bit about the creation of the record, which I was really excited. If you've listened to some of my music conversations, I tend to nerd out about like guitars and like in-studio process stuff. I'm really interested in that stuff because before I got into comedy or doing podcasts, I wanted to be an actor, and I was in bands. So I was super excited to get to chat about some of this stuff with Adam. And the new record, if you haven't heard of Blind Adam and the Federal League, definitely check their stuff out. If you like really gritty, earnest, heartfelt, salt of the earth, kind of like impassioned, blues-influenced punk rock, Blind Adam and the Federal League is where you need to be. I really enjoy, and the new record, and we kind of talk about this a little bit. The plans for the record may change as a result of COVID-19, but I will have Adam on again, and we will talk about that once the album is released. But we were able to sit down and have a chat about Chicago, guitars, the punk rock scene, touring. Really awesome, interesting, great music talk from someone whose music I've come to really enjoy. And Adam's just a very solid dude, and I really appreciate that he took the time to talk to me, because we're all managing as people, but then especially as artists, managing having to adapt to the reality of COVID-19 at present, because can't do shows right now. Can't have large groups of people. Things are changing constantly, and the situation is continuing to evolve. So we are going to discuss a little bit about that as well. So make sure you stay tuned towards the end, because Adam is working with a really great cause as far as trying to benefit and help people that are affected by COVID-19. And I will have links for all of that stuff in the description. If you guys enjoy this, I rely on people who love what I do to tell other people. So if you know someone who might enjoy this podcast, we're available on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you want to sign up for Stitcher Premium, you can get a free month by using the promo code AWESOME. That's a way you can get a free month for yourself and help support the show as well. I really appreciate I appreciate you guys being here and for me during this time, because this is one way I'm keeping my routine and mental health in check. So thank you guys so much for being here, and let's go to my chat with Adam Gogola of Blind Adam and the Federal League.
Hello.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
Hey, awesome. This is Will. Good to hear. Good to hear from you, man. How are you doing?
Oh, I guess I'm doing all right considering the state of the world. How are you?
I'm also doing all right considering the state of the world. I imagine that this, and I've seen this a lot on the internet as well, because I feel for me personally, I can still create and do a lot of stuff while staying while being in my apartment. But I know uh, for guys like you and touring musicians, this is a really big issue.
Oh yeah, I mean we haven't had to cancel a ton of shows. We've had to cancel a good maybe five or six, but the biggest problem for us right now in that regard is late last month, early this month, I was starting to work on booking tours for like July and August for after the record comes out, and right now no one's trying to book anything because no one knows how long this is going to last or what the what everything's going to look like once places start to slowly reopen. So it's like we have the record coming out in late June or early July, hopefully, and like that's even still up in the air, you know. So it's wild. It's a wild time to be doing this kind of stuff.
Oh my god, absolutely. I This is the first like relatively recently. This is the first like nation like worldwide issue that has really just ground really altered the course of my life, and I imagine a lot of other people. What I will say though,
Oh,
regardless,
it's going to alter the course of human history. I think you know we this is the way that society has been structured and the way that everything has been going the last whatever you want to say 40 years or so longer. Maybe it's unsustainable, and we're seeing all of the faults exposed right now,
absolutely,
and we
all of
can't
the
keep
little
like things need
things.
to fundamentally change after this.
I agree completely. Every like
What's
little
that?
what I was saying was like every little thing that I think that I ever thought, does do we really have to do this like this? Do we need to have a meeting, or can we discuss this over email? At least I've seen a lot of my friends tweet stuff like that. Tweet stuff like that. Like just the overall like way of life again is going to shift drastically, and I hope that more people are going to start taking it seriously, so that maybe this isn't how we all live our lives now.
Right. Like if if hospitals were fully stocked with the proper protective equipment, and if they had enough capacity and ventilators and respirators, then we wouldn't have to be shutting everything down and if our testing capacity was, I don't know, the whole, we don't have to, we can talk about punk rock music because uh, I think that's one thing that's going to keep us going through all of this. I mean, we could analyze this situation all night, and it's
Uh,
just going to be infuriating.
oh, absolutely. I just every I've had part of how I'm keeping my routine going is to just I've scheduled a lot of podcasts now that I've got my remote setup figured out. But I feel compelled to
Right.
do like a mental health and physical check with everybody I talk. But speaking of punk rock music, you were kind enough to send me your new record that's slated to come out in summer, and whenever it does, I'll scream about it until the hills here, because I really enjoyed it, dude.
Yeah, maybe we can have another shorter conversation around then. That's not, clouded by all of this stuff going on. But you said you listened through it and you really enjoyed it.
Yes I did, and I'm going to tell you everything
Thank you
about
very
it
much.
that
I really appreciate that.
oh, dude, absolutely. I'll tell you like the things that kind of really jumped out at it for me, because it has the songs themselves are incredible. That I really enjoyed, like just the songs. Like I could see myself like pumping my fist, jumping up and down, like everything that good punk rock music makes me want to do. And for me especially, and I don't know, and I mean, and I say this as a compliment to me, and I felt this listening to your other stuff as well. I felt like a lot of the songs feel very Chicago to me. Like I'm starting to pick up. There's a stylistic uh, kind of grit and groove to bands that come out of Chicago, and I felt like your stuff like really embodies that, especially the new record.
Oh, I'd take that as a compliment for sure. Yeah, I feel like in some ways, like when I talk about the songs on whether it's our first record we did a few years ago or this one, that the city almost kind of seems like a character in the stories, unintentionally though. You know, it's not like we grew up going to Lawrence Arm shows and they're a great band, but I almost feel like it's more intentional in their songs. And for the way I write and the way I think about it is just like my perspective on the world comes from growing up here in like a union working class family on the South Side. So it kind of informs everything. I don't know, the way I interact with current events and understand political and social issues and stuff. So I guess, yeah, thank you for recognizing that, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Because to me, your stuff kind of it feels like it has like I feel like a grounding in like Chicago blues. Like it feel like a Chicago blues kind of sound with the energy, passion, and like working people kind of vibe of punk rock, which I love and really identify with. And then there's like a like folk there's like a folk rock like social conscious to it all that I really identify with. Like you're the kind of we've haven't met in person yet, but you strike me like as the kind of guy that I would have like several beers with and then have multiple high fives after.
Well, thank you. I agree with you on all counts and appreciate you recognizing those things. When you hear the Chicago blues aspect of our sound, I guess you're probably hearing our lead guitar player, Ellie. She is one of the best guitar players I've ever seen, and definitely the best I've had the privilege to play with. And her favorites are like, Howlin' Wolf, absolute Chicago blues legend, and that's one of Ellie's favorite artists, regardless of genre.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, she will take that as a huge compliment that you picked up on the blues guitar playing. And yeah, I was raised on like my mom's a huge Neil Young and Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen fan, and my dad always loved John Prine. So it's like growing up listening to songs that were about something, and it could be fun. Music is supposed to be fun, but it can still also, point your attention towards important issues and marginalized people who might not necessarily have their own voice as much. I think it's a cool way to have a good time, is with a purpose and by trying to make the world a little bit less shitty.
Yeah, 100%. I'd always felt that this might sound like an odd comparison, but for me, another genre of music that does that very well is ska. Like ska music, I've always had tons of fun going to those shows, but if you really like sat down and listened to the lyrics, a lot of them can be very depressing. So I always
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've always been very attracted to music for a good time that makes you feel something, and I think you fall right into that. I kind of want to trace this a little bit. So you're born in Chicago on the South Side.
Yeah.
So my understanding of Chicago, I've only been there once. I'm finding I've talked to more and more musicians from Chicago. My understanding of Chicago is if you grew up in the suburbs and and say you're from Chicago, people who actually live in the city hate that. And my understanding of North is much better off socioeconomically than the South.
So, I guess to your first point, I'm so technically, if you want to get down to like uh, street address, I was originally from one block south of the city limits. I was on 87th Place, and the city limit on the south side there is 87th Street. So we were one block south in a really small town called Hometown
Mm-hmm.
that most people, it's a tiny suburb, most people around here don't even know what it is. And then when I was in third grade, my family moved to Joliet, which is about 35, 40 miles southwest of the city. And after college, I moved to Logan Square, which is on the northwest side.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, if you were to move to Chicago and then tell people that you met from wherever that you live in Chicago or you're from Chicago, that's fine. Who cares? It doesn't matter if you like it here. Like whatever. None of us are from. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That debate is kind of silly to me. But people do want to. I don't know. It makes people feel better to let someone else know that I was here first. I guess.
Yeah,
Silly mentality to me. And then I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, I was saying I agree because my fiance is born and raised in Brooklyn. I've lived in New York for 10 years, and I will never be a New Yorker to her.
Yeah, right. Like 10 years. What? That's a long time.
Yeah, that's
Where'd
what
you
I
grow
thought
up?
it. I grew up in southern Maryland, about an hour south of DC, like really country, like a really rural part of southern Maryland called Calvert County. The actual place I grew up has a population of like 800. It's just big enough that the census keeps track. That's where I'm from.
Do they recognize it? Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So I've
growing.
been. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Well, you asked to. I think the second part of your question about Chicago was about like the economic disparities on the north and south sides,
Mm-hmm.
and I would. It's it's definitely. I think that's one way to look at it without being very nuanced because there are like impoverished areas all over the city, but really the south side and the west side have the most. It's poverty, but it's by design. The city was segregated on purpose.
Yeah.
Uh, people of color were basically put into certain areas because they weren't going to get in. They made it harder to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
They made it harder to get a job, harder to get into the places to find jobs, and so you see a lot of people of color on the south side and west side, and very little economic investment. And then once those areas do start to see some economic investment, it's done in a way that is gentrifying the neighborhood, so the original residents can't really afford to stay there anymore, even if they own their house outright. Like the property taxes go up because the property values go up, so they might get priced out of their own home that they own from the bank. Like they hold the deed, but the property taxes go up and they have to leave. So, yeah, I mean, we're like on the northwest side, sort of, and we're kind of in a neighborhood that has been over the last 10 years gentrified pretty hard. And if you
Mm-hmm.
live in Brooklyn now, you said,
Oh,
yeah, so you've
I
been
live
seeing the
in.
same thing. I'm
Um,
sure.
oh yeah, it's absolutely the same thing. I actually live in Astoria, Queens now, but it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. I was talking to a comedian friend of mine. His name's Gaston Almonte. He grew up in East New York, which is I think going to be the last holdout for gentrification because uh, he was telling me he actually has a joke about how like he owns a building and then he contributed to his own neighborhood's gentrification by the tenants he was starting to get. Um, but yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of like deep rooted, no matter what, because it sometimes feels like and I might be thinking about this because I saw that American Factory documentary, but there's no matter what, sometimes there's a feeling of no matter what you do, it could all go away instantly, no matter how hard you work, no matter what.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a statistic that most Americans can't afford a $400 emergency, and I would fall in that category. If there was something that came up and I had to pay $400, like right after I had paid rent,
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the month I might be able to do it. But like at the beginning of the month, if it's right after I paid rent and something came up that I had to spend that much money on, like I don't know that I'd be able to do that every month.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, like, so you grew up on near the south side of Chicago, and what was your home life like growing up? What was your family like?
My dad works. Well, he worked in a freezer warehouse for 30 years. He still works now. He's 66. They've been off because of the shutdown of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But he worked in a freezer warehouse. He was a Teamster for 30 years. My mom stayed at home with my sister and I until we started going to school. And then she was working as like a lunch lady for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we moved out to Joliet, she got that job again, basically. And then when I was in sixth grade, so there's a song on the record. The title of that song would be "There Was a Ball Game," and it's probably the most like kind of sonically experimental we've gotten. But that song is supposed to be kind of like a letter to my grandmother, who made me a Cubs fan, about the Cubs won the World Series 5 days before Donald Trump got elected.
Yeah.
And so I think like if you're gonna ask about like my upbringing, and if we're talking about the songs, like that all kind of ties into current events too. So like that song is supposed to be kind of a letter to my grandmother about like the last good thing that happened before things got significantly worse. I mean, it was already bad for a lot of people, but for this, and so in 1996, she died. I was in sixth grade, and then just a few months later, my parents were in a really bad car accident. They got hit head on by a drunk driver, and so like that was a crazy year. My mom, when she recovered from that, eventually she had like shattered her hip.
Oh man.
Compound fracture in her ankle. My dad had a few broken ribs, but then when she recovered from that, she started working as an aide for special ed students in the public school district that we went to.
Mm-hmm.
And then she did that job for, she is probably going to retire now because she just had back surgery again, but she did that job for over 20 years. And then, yeah, my dad, my parents both always had union jobs, and, my mom worked with special ed students, autistic students mostly. And then when they finally closed the plant that my dad worked at, he got a job at the school district as a custodian. So he's been doing that now for 5 or 6 years. So, yeah, I guess that's a brief summary of my upbringing. We always had music on in the house. So my parents were always playing like I mentioned earlier, Springsteen, Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
They had a couple of Clash records.
The Clash.
Mostly like classic rock and. Oh yeah.
That's
my
awesome.
Dad had some Clash. Oh yeah.
That's really cool to hear that, because it took me much longer to discover like the Clash and the Ramones than it does I feel like most cool people that end up getting really into music. My dad, to his credit, he did play me Led Zeppelin 4, but I think I was too young to appreciate it. But I remember him trying to play me. I remember him trying to play me "Cat Scratch Fever" by Ted Nugent and laughing at him because I just was like, what? This is the dumbest song I've ever heard at that time. I think I was
I
like,
think laughter is the only appropriate response to Ted Nugent.
yeah, because either laugh or you just get enraged when you listen to him at this point. But the cool thing I remember,
Exactly.
but the one the music that my mom was really into is she loved like Motown stuff. So there was like she had the Big
That's
Chill
awesome.
soundtrack. So I just like was like Marvin Gaye, like all these like classic all these classic R&B and like
Temptation.
yeah, Temptations. Like my first band in high school, like we did a rock cover of My Girl and just like brought the house down at her talent show, and that was like a great thing that I always
That's awesome.
credit my mom to. And so, did you start playing music like early on, or did that come later?
Yeah, well, I think I always wanted to. I had like a plastic toy guitar when I was a little kid that my parents got me, and I would stand in the living room and just scream Springsteen songs before I could even spell my name, probably. And then I wanted a guitar real bad, and I would ask for it for Christmas every year. And I think it would have been the Christmas that I was in sixth grade, same year that all that stuff happened, same year that my grandma died, same year that my parents got in that real bad car wreck.
Right.
I got like a J.C. Penney's catalog, Harmony, like Stratocaster ripoff, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the kind of kid that would always go like looking for my Christmas gifts to try to find them and see what
Uh-huh.
they were. And I found it, and I would like stand in front of the mirror and hold it and think I was real cool. And then my mom caught me one day, and that was probably the most embarrassed I ever was as a child. Um, and then so like for my following birthday, which is in May, my parents got me like maybe like 6 weeks worth of guitar lessons, and they're like, let's see how this goes. We don't want to overcommit here. And my guitar teacher at this real small like local music store, local independent music store. And my guitar teacher's name was Gary, and he was like this old biker dude with a like super long hair and long beard. He walked with a cane because of a motorcycle wreck,
Uh-huh.
a bunch of tattoos, and I was like, well, this dude's really cool. It made me really nervous. He offered me a cigarette. I was in sixth grade. And then he taught me how to play Alice Cooper songs. And I took guitar lessons from him for like almost 2 years. And by the end of it, I was starting to find my own music and like really get into punk rock. And I was like bringing in Rancid CDs. And he's like, man, I never heard this before, but I kind of like it.
Uh-huh.
And he's like this probably, mid-50s biker dude from Joliet, Illinois.
That's great. Well, that's the
Yeah,
kind of guy I imagine would love Rancid now.
yeah, if you're still alive.
Yeah, exactly. Gary, I hope you're out there, buddy. There's so much great stuff out there. So you take guitar lessons from him, and so you start discovering punk rock. So Rancid was big for you early on, because I always feel like everyone that like it gets into punk rock, there's a come to Jesus moment, but Jesus is like wearing a leather jacket and studs.
Well, yeah, I know what you're talking about for sure. I'm 34. I'll be 35 in May. So I was 9 years old when Dookie came out,
Uh huh.
and I saw the music video for Basket Case on MTV. And so the next time we went to the mall, I just like I had money from like mowing neighborhood lawns or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
and I went and bought. That was the first CD I ever had. And then I also liked like Out Come the Wolves came out around the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and I liked that, so I bought that. And then I was pretty young, and then like in junior high, I had a crush on a girl that liked Korn, so I liked Korn.
Uh huh.
And and um and then like I started making friends with some dudes that skateboarded, like guys that I knew through baseball that also liked Green Day and Rancid and like the few bands that we had heard of. And so they started showing me more bands, and it was like probably eighth grade or so that I really started discovering like the Bouncing Souls, and I knew and Out Come the Wolves, but I didn't know anything else from Rancid or Operation Ivy. And yeah, so really like 8th grade, I went to Warped Tour that year, and that was like a life-changing experience for me.
Oh yeah, that's like I went to Warped Tour the first time in 2005. So I was older at the time, but it was like it was just like being a kid in a candy store. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is everything I want it to be and more. And like for like 3 years straight, like me and my friends, we would all go get there super early and then go in, run up to the board, like write our schedules, like, oh, okay, we'll go see them, and then we'll be over here, and then we'll touch base back here, and then we'll go over to this stage. It was that tour, I feel like is responsible for a good number of the bands that are doing like punk and like pop punk now. And even though like
Oh
you're
yeah, I mean, like a generation, like probably 2 generations of kids grew up going to that, and because when did it start? Like in the mid '90s, and it
yeah
just ended last year.
yeah it just like I think the final like full country tour was last year, and now I think they do like weekends like here and there in different places.
Yeah, just like a one-off festival.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was like the highlight of the summer every year for like 5 or 6 years for me.
Mhm.
Probably 8th grade through senior year of high school at least.
Yeah, the
And
absolutely. Okay, so
uh, yeah,
I'm
but then I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say like you asked about when I started playing music, so that was like when I started playing guitar, and then 8th grade was also when I met. There was a friend of mine, a guy I'm still friends with now. He took bass lessons from the same old biker dude right before me, so he'd be walking out with his bass, and then I'd walk in, and we'd like kind of nod at each other, but we didn't really talk much. And then eventually I like worked up the courage to ask him if he wanted to try to start a band with me. And so we found we found some other dude that we went to school with that played the drums, and that was like 8th grade was the first time we like really put a band together.
Awesome. So it was that early. It was that early on for you. And have you pretty much been based in Chicago the entirety of your music career?
Yeah. So yeah, like southwest Chicago suburbs from um like what time I was 8th grade and first tried to start a band, and then I had a band in high school that lasted from my freshman year of high school until about a year and a half or 2 years after I graduated. Oh, it was 2
Mm-hmm.
years after I graduated we broke up. But that band was based in the southwest suburbs, but we played Chicago pretty regularly. We played with some not huge bands, but like that band opened up for Mustard Plug a few times, and uh, the River City Rebels. We played the last show that Wesley Willis ever played at Fireside Bowl.
Oh
Um,
wow, that's like the most Chicago sentence I've heard doing this podcast.
yeah, that was, and then no one knew it was going to be his last show. He just happened to die, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But that was pretty wild. And then and that took time off after high school when I was in that band because we had like a month-long tour booked for right after we graduated, and we played a show at Fireside Bowl the night of our drummer's graduation. Yeah, so he missed his graduation to play a show at Fireside, and then about a week later we hit the road for about a month. And between the 6 of us that piled in the van, I think we had 3 cell phones, and we had an atlas and a binder full of printed out MapQuest directions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and then didn't start. I didn't start college till a year after that. I went to community college, and that band kind of fizzled out around 2005. And then when I moved down to Bloomington, Illinois, where I went to school at Illinois State, I eventually started a band called the Night Brigade with a few friends of mine. And that band, we toured around the Midwest and on the East Coast a few times, went down south a few times, and we were just kind of not that much different than Blind Adam in the Federal League, but it was it was more of like straightforward punk band.
Mm-hmm.
And we were actually out on the East Coast at the Stone Pony with the Bouncing Souls for one of their it was like 2009 Home for the Holidays, I think. We played with Chuck Reagan and Screaming Females and the Bouncing Souls. That was pretty cool. We put out a couple of EPs and we got to do some cool shows. The Bouncing Souls actually helped us get on Warped Tour when I was 9. Just like one show, but to be able to say I got to play it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's I remember like wanting to just play Warped Tour one time. I never got to do it, but that must have been incredible. And something I wanted to ask you before, I would love to ask about the early touring for you. You mentioned Wesley Willis, so he's like this mythic character to me, like as far as like a very Chicago eccentric, like musical outsider artist type figure. How aware of you were? God, I can't talk all of a sudden. Were you aware of him like when you were coming up in the music scene in Chicago? Like, did you see him around ever?
He played a Fireside Bowl pretty regularly. I basically had no idea who he was until I did. You know, like I think someone gave me a Wesley Willis CD or something when I was maybe a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I hadn't heard of him. There wasn't like a legend around him that I was aware of. And then, but once I heard the CD and I like, you know, it was like 25 songs or something, and they're all basically the same.
Right.
And but they're all like, I don't know, in their own way. He had a great sense of humor, and he obviously was mentally ill, but like he was making funny songs on purpose. There's a couple of documentaries about him that you can find on YouTube. One of them is called Hell Rides, and so once I was aware of him, then I started realizing who he was when I would see him around at shows and stuff. Like he would come to Fireside Bowl sometimes, or he'd be around, not super often, but he got booked with punk bands all the time, so he knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And like we probably played with him 3 times, and after the first time we played with him, he remembered our names, and he would like sing about us on stage and stuff. Whether the show was packed or if there was 15 people there, he was having a good time.
That's cool. I've heard he was a pretty. I've heard despite like the mental illness he was wrestling with, I've heard nothing but positive interactions with him. I'm friends with the buddies with the rapper MC Lars, and he has an album.
Oh, cool.
That was named after what I guess would have been Wesley Willis's album before he passed. This Gigantic Robot Kills came out a few years ago, but it's still like really, really good. I love all of his stuff. Actually, why I don't know why I'm saying why I'm qualifying it. Okay, so you're in this band, and so I'm guessing I'm imagining at this point, as far as putting together tours, it's like either that website Book Your Own Fucking Life or like real like DIY word of mouth.
That's what we use.
Oh, cool. Yeah, cool. So you use that website.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Like I remember it was like the second semester of my senior year of high school. We were solely focused on booking that tour because we were already playing shows outside of the Chicago area.
Mm-hmm.
Like probably as soon as we could drive. You know, I got a minivan, and one of my other bandmates had like a Buick, and then another guy had a minivan as well. So like if we had to, like if we were playing a show pretty far away, but we wanted to bring our friends out, all the gear would go in one vehicle, and then we'd just like pile everyone else into the other ones, and we would do that. So we were playing like around the Midwest and Wisconsin and Southern Illinois and Indiana and whatever. But then that whole second semester of my senior year of high school, all we were focused on was like putting our new CD out and booking this tour. And so me and the other guitar player in the band would like meet up during passing periods of class and be like, we'd have like printouts of Book Your Own Fucking Life pages. And it's like, hey, we need to contact these places and these cities. And we're basically like calling them or emailing, but mostly calling them at that point. we call them and ask who books shows, talk to someone on the phone. They would like write a date down on a calendar and be like, yeah, send your CD to this address. Once I listen to it, I'll call you back and confirm the show. It was crazy. It was a crazy process. Now you like message someone on Instagram with a link to your Spotify, and they're like, oh, hey, I'm in a band. I'll help you book the show. And you might hear back from them within an hour.
Yeah, it can happen so quickly now.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that it's still hard to book tours. It's maybe, it's easier to get in touch with people, but it's still hard to book tours. But like that was like a week-long process just for one show, the way that we were booking that kind of stuff.
Oh wow, that's a crazy sounding time. The other thing that I always stress about now, because I feel like my world in stand-up comedy has adapted a lot of the book your own fucking life ethos, because there's so many comedians that are existing outside of the traditional comedy club circuit, because that's reserved for like the people who are on TV who can sell tickets. So many of us are existing outside of the traditional system, but I always like my biggest the thing I stress about the most when it comes to DIY culture is that like 15 minutes before showtime starts, where it's like, is anyone going to show up in this room, please?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we played a show. We played with Anti-Flag in December, like a week before Christmas, and it was sold out, and it was great. It sold out like a week before the show, and we opened. And when you're the first act to go on, whether it's comedy or music or whatever, like people kind of trickle in the door, and you don't know when they're going to show up. But the room was full before we went on, and that was awesome. And then we played on a Thursday night in January, about a month later, and it was like, yeah, doors are open. People end up showing up to the show later, but you start to wonder, like, especially if you're on the road, are we just going to be playing? Is this going to be a rehearsal? Like, are we playing to the bartender and the sound engineer?
Yeah, exactly. I always I like there. I just freak. It's just my biggest. That's my biggest show business stress. I don't get scared about like bombing, because I've bombed before and I've lived, or I've played. I've played shows where the crowd's not loving like the band I'm in, but as long as people are there and like I don't feel like I've let anyone down, that's the biggest stress of mine currently. Something I wanted to ask you a couple guitar questions before. I'd love to get into what you're doing now with Blind Adam and the Federal League. Has your like gear setup stayed relatively consistent through the bands you've played in, or has that changed over time? I'm curious, like what kind of guitars and amps you use.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I played the same amp setup from the old like high school band was called the Article 57, and then the band I was in college, and then for a while after was the Night Brigade. And for both of those bands, I played through. I had a Marshall JCM 2000 DSL 100 head, and then a 1960 Marshall cab.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the A is just the slanted cab, and the B was the straight up and down one.
Mm-hmm.
I had that for both of those bands, and then guitars that I was playing then. I like saved up a bunch of money when I was working at a pizza place in high school, and I like pre-ordered this not custom, but it was like a signature model Mossrite reissue from Mass Giorgini from Screeching Weasel. His brother opened up like a guitar manufacturer. Basically, he was like a boutique guitar maker.
Oh wow!
And he like bought the licensing to make like the Mossrite guitars, and so he made a Ben Weasel signature model Mossrite guitar basically. And so I bought that, and I thought it's a cool guitar. I don't really play it anymore. It's just basically if you look up Mossrite guitars, it looks just like one of those, and it had a Bigsby on it, so it was a really hard guitar to string. And I almost never used the whammy bar, so
Uh-huh.
it was pretty pointless. It just looked cool. Um, it was heavy, had dual humbuckers, and whatever, it's fine. Um, I played that through the Marshall, and then I also, like, I think right after high school, I picked up it's a deluxe thin line Telecaster
Mm-hmm.
72 reissue, and that's the one with the humbuckers too. And so I
Yeah.
play that. I still have that guitar, and I still have all my guitars pretty much. I'm too sentimental to get rid of them. But really, um, the 72 reissue I like a lot in the studio, but I need to get something else as like a backup live. Cause I've been using it as my backup live, but live my primary guitar it's a thin line Telecaster. It's like the American Elite model and
Mm-hmm.
from Fender, and I was only able to get that because a friend of mine got me a really nice deal, and I appreciate it very much. But it's a really nice guitar, and it plays really well, and it sounds great. I played that through like a modded Fender Blues Junior, and then I don't have a big pedal board, but I do have like a clean boost EQ kind of from Earthquaker, and it's just got like just four knobs, like level, gain, bass, and treble. I keep the gain pretty much all the way down, and then I have another Earthquaker pedal that I use for like my overdrive,
Mm-hmm.
and then like a little carbon copy delay that I'll use on a few songs here and there. But it's a pretty simple setup, and I think the Telecaster sounds really nice for the Blues Junior. I sold that Marshall because I felt like the kind of music I wanted to play in this band, it wasn't really necessary to have that giant amp.
No, yeah, totally. That makes sense to me. Yeah, that's and I feel like as far as classic like blues and like beautiful sounding rock guitars, Telecasters are just the bee's knees. Do you take anything into consideration like gear wise when it comes to like working with a second guitarist, like to make sure that she stands out and that like you guys don't blend together too much? I'm curious how the dynamic between having two guitarists in a band works.
Yeah, so I really only play rhythm guitar in this band. I did some lead guitar stuff in my other bands, but Ellie is such a great guitar player, and is also a great songwriter and has her own projects
Mm-hmm.
that she's written for. So I feel like she's coming to these songs as a songwriter herself. So the guitar parts that she writes and plays are to complement the song. And so I'm playing a single coil most of the time. She's got a Les Paul Jr. and then a Gibson Melody Maker that she's been playing, and she was playing Telecasters as well, but I think switching to the Gibsons is probably good to kind of like kind of beef it up a little bit. And then I don't know what her pedal board is set up as right now, but she's playing out of a Fender Princeton Reverb. So neither of us have big amps, but they put out plenty of noise for what we're doing. And yeah, I think we complement each other's guitar playing well. We're not like super gear nerds, but we're pretty conscious about how we want our guitars to sound so that they sound good together and apart from each other. So that's something we'll spend some time messing around at the practice space once in a while, just trying to get cool guitar sounds. And I think we did a good job with that. So that all the gear setup stuff I'm telling you right now, though, is not the sounds you're hearing on the record necessarily. That's our live setup.
Mm-hmm.
On the record that we just did, Chris, too, from Anti-Flag produced it, and we recorded at Anti-Flag Studio. He had us record everything. He had us play all the guitars and the bass guitar out of Chris Head's Vox AC30. And that's an amp that they don't, like, Head doesn't use that live,
Right.
but he has it there at the space. And it's a great sounding amp. And they have a ton of pedals there, so we could kind of. What did you think? You're a guitar player as well, right?
Yes.
What do you think of the guitar tones on that record?
I love the guitar tones on that record. I feel like because I guess for punk rock, my sense memory is, I guess, goes back to that classic, like, jacked up Marshall sound, but I thought the guitar tones were beautiful on this. I feel like I just thought they really, like, worked for the songs perfectly and had that, like, they sounded like I said, like, punked up kind of blues, kind of a blues tones, and I really thought they worked perfectly for the album, dude. Absolutely.
Cool, thank you. You are one of the first people to hear it outside of, like, our band and our like, our partners and maybe, all of our Anti-Flag and AF Records buds. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm honored to be included in to be able to get to hear it before so many people do. One thing, since we're talking about the record, I'm curious. I the first time when Chris and Justin did my podcast, that was the first time I'd ever really met them in person. I love those dudes. Those guys are great. I'm curious, outside of them doing this new album on AF Records, what is working with Chris Dose as a producer like? I'm curious, because I've seen him on stage, and I always point to him as, like, the example of what punk rock looks like. But I'm curious, like, what is he like as a producer and in the studio?
Well, he spilled his coffee every single day. That doesn't really have anything to do with the story, but I just figured if he ends up listening to this, I wanted to start with that. Yeah, it was great. I've known those dudes personally as friends for a really long time, but never worked with Chris like that. I've never, as a musician, I've never worked with such a hands-on producer.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the engineer will have some ideas, and maybe some ideas for tones or, some instrumentation with the arrangements or whatever. But what we did, the process for this record was different than any other record I'd ever made before. We went out to Pittsburgh. We sent Chris a round of, like, really rough demos that we just made on our, like, a phone at practice space.
Mm-hmm.
At the practice space, and we went out to Pittsburgh for a couple of days in August, and we just kind of sat in the studio with him and went through each song and kind of, like, pointed out strengths and weaknesses, and he gave his input on how he thought, we could emphasize certain parts and make it the best song possible. And then we'd work on a song for a few hours and then record a demo of it and then move on to the next one. And so we did that for 2 whole days. And then we went home with these demos, and it was basically like, all right, come back in 2 months after you've relearned your songs, and we'll make this record. And it was great of him to do that while they were so busy working on. They had just, when we went out there in August, they had just finished tracking 2020 Vision about 2 weeks earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they're planning tours and planning the record coming out and everything. And he had us come back out for a week in October, and we tracked everything that week. And then, like, meanwhile, they're getting ready to, excuse me, they're going to tour. They're getting ready to put the record out, and he's trying to find time to mix it. And he couldn't find time to mix it before they left for their European tour. So he mixed most of it on the bus in Europe.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, it was wild. It was cool work. But you asked more about the process in the studio. Working with him was great. He had a lot of ideas we wouldn't have had on our own, and or would like hear something in one of our ideas and kind of like put his perspective on it. And uh, it was never, I never felt like I was like giving up control. I just felt like it was a very collaborative process, you know. And for the time that we worked with him, he was like the fifth member of the band, essentially, not like some outside person telling us what to do.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense to me because you want someone who's maybe has a degree of separation from the songs. Because I and in different bands I've played in, I've gone through different periods of being vastly overprotective of songs and being too and then being like like very resistant to changes or outside input. So it's healthy to be able to have someone that that you trust and to be able to hear something and offer suggestions that you might not have heard on your own.
absolutely, like, so if you listen through the record, the song "If I Don't Make It Home" was a song that we had written and we had been playing live, and the basic structure of it didn't really change. It's still like intro, you know, verse, chorus, and then a key change at the end. Like that basic structure didn't change, but it was more played like almost more like a Lucero song, or people would say it sounded like a Social Distortion song or something. It was more like a swan, like rock and roll song.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing it, and he was just like, "Hey, when you sent the demo, I kind of heard something in the song. You know, what if we made it sound like the Clash?" And it was like, never even thought of that for this song, and I wouldn't have. And I thought it was okay the way it was, but now it hits way harder, and I feel like it's a song that'll stick with people more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's I really dug that song in particular. And you were talking about that song.
He sings on that too.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that the ball game song you that you were talking about for your grandmother that has the comment that has the sports announcer audio mixed in. I thought that was really creative because like I know and I also know this like Chicago being such a diehard like passionate sports fandom. It really that song like really took me somewhere emotionally. I really dug it, dude.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that was another song when we went to the studio to do pre-production. We had like I had that first verse and like a concept for what the song could be in my mind, and I wasn't really sure where to go with it. And he was like, "Don't worry about the lyrics. Let's just, you know, you have the structure." And we like worked out a structure for it. And then because we had that, and he helped us build that part of it, went home and I just, like the rest of the lyrics just came right out. And then when we actually recorded it, we had been listening. Excuse me. We had been listening to a lot of Sound and Fury, the new Sturgill Simpson record, and we just kind of got a little creative with pedals and effects and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that song turned out pretty cool. It's different than anything I've ever done, but also kind of reminds me of the Bouncing Souls a little bit.
Yeah, that's and that's what I what really drew me to your stuff when I first listened to it when we first started talking late last year is um there's this like you were talking about like you used to play in like very like straightforward kind of bands where there's like kind of like one set kind of tone and feel to the band genre wise, but the stuff you're doing as Blind Adam in the Federal League, I feel like it, and just from talking to you over the past hour or so, feels like the culmination of all of your artistic influences in one band at this moment.
Yeah, I think so, and I think like to me, and so everyone, like everyone that is in the band currently and has been in the band, we all grew up as punk rockers, but we all grew up listening to all kinds of music, and any genre of music can be done well. I love country music. I really like a lot of hip hop music, a lot of classic rock, folk, blues, I'm not a huge fan of jazz. It's fine if it's on in the background quietly, but I like music with lyrics. But yeah, any genre. I love Irish folk music. But I think like there's a pretty good like country music scene in Chicago, like honky tonk scene, and I'm friends with a lot of those people, and they would just tell me that I'm in a punk band, and all of our friends in punk bands in Chicago think we're like a country band, and I think I don't know, I think this is like rock and roll in the year 2020. I don't know, like I don't know what else to call it. Like I think we're a rock and roll band,
Oh,
but I'm
absolutely.
okay with
Yeah,
yeah, I'm okay with being called a punk band.
excellent. I would also if I was putting together like a dream tour in my head, if you are you familiar with a band called 500 Miles to Memphis?
I don't think I am, no.
I think you would. I think you would dig your. I think you would dig their stuff a lot. They have a lot of. They have that like kind of like hot rodded, punked up kind of blues and country influenced thing going on as well. So I really enjoy.
Oh, cool.
I would definitely recommend checking that out. Something else I would love to ask you. I love to ask music people this because, and also especially because I'm gonna have a lot of free time for the foreseeable future. What is a record?
Yeah,
What's a record you're listening to right now that you don't think enough people know about that I should listen to?
I think a record that people don't know enough about right now, and especially at this moment with what we're dealing with, is by a folk singer-songwriter named Joan Shelley. She is from Kentucky, and the record is called "Like the River Loves the Sea." And there's a song on it called "The Fading," and it's kind of about seeing the world as we know it kind of fall apart because of climate change. And I think it's a beautiful song, and I think with what we're all dealing with right now, it's like a very soft, beautiful record. The lyrics are beautiful, the guitar playing is amazing, but it's also lyrically very relevant to what's going on in the world. So it's like socially and politically conscious, and you wouldn't even necessarily know it unless you were paying attention.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait to listen to that. Thank you so much for that. So one
Absolutely.
so I guess a couple of other things I want to make sure we touch on before we get out here. Kind of going on with basically what we're talking about right now. So I would love to. I absolutely want to have you on again when the records officially comes out, whenever that is.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll be on the other side of this shit.
yeah, 100%. So what I wanted to ask you, what are you in the are you guys in the band making any plans for what you can do while you're not able to tour or do as many shows during this during COVID-19? And what are those things? What can I help plug for you?
Absolutely. So we are partnering with our friends at Mystery Street Recording. Joe, that owns Mystery Street, is a friend of mine that I actually met at an Anti-Flag show in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
He owns the studio. He's currently mastering the new record, and he recorded our 7-inch that we put out last year. We're doing a weekly live stream for as long as we can. If we have to send in pre-recorded videos, we'll figure that out. But no matter what, it'll be posted at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays. We're asking for donations for a Chicago organization called the Night Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
They provide healthcare. They provide healthcare, shelter, education, and human connection. All kinds of really great services to people experiencing homelessness and poverty in Chicago. We did the first one on Wednesday. We had some other great Chicago musicians on the show. We had Wild Earp, Jillian McGee, my girlfriend, who has a project called Hi Ho, with her former bandmate Jason Swearingen, Jay Douglas, and Turnspit, and then our friend Damian Wilburn from the Blind Staggers. We raised well over $1,000 And then we also, our lead guitar player, Ellie, kind of took the reins on helping collect the supplies that they need during this time. And so she dropped off a bunch of stuff to them today because they're kind of on the front lines of this, dealing with the most vulnerable in our city. So we're going to keep that going every Wednesday until probably after this is over, because the recovery is going to be hard too. And then otherwise, if you just find me on Facebook or Instagram, I might just smoke some weed and play some songs from home too. But the big thing, we're calling it the quarantine live stream Wednesday nights to benefit the night ministry, and then we may branch off and help some other organizations. But last week and this week are both going to be focused on them, and everyone needs help right now. Bands, people that work in the service industry, whatever. So if you don't have any money to donate, that's totally fine. Just, check in anyway and watch, because I had tears in my eyes the whole time it was happening. And then after it was over, I got a ton of messages, text messages, and, DMs on Instagram and whatever. People that were like having really shitty days, full of like existential dread and anxiety, and they were able to go to bed with a smile on their face because of that. So that to me was just as important as raising the money for the organization.
That's great. That's great, man. That sounds like a really worthwhile cause. And again, what I imagine anyone who creates wants to do is touch people with their art and help others. So I'm glad that you're doing that. And yeah, if you have any links that you can send me, let me know. I'll probably post this not next week, but the week after. And I would absolutely love to try to bring some attention to that. So that's great. I'm glad you're doing that.
I'll send you that stuff when we get off the phone.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Adam, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you taking time to talk to me. And I would love to send you my band stuff as well, just so I can get your feedback, because I'm always trying to learn more from people who've been doing it longer than me. And thank you very much for your time, dude.
Oh, yeah. Send me your band stuff. I'll send you the information about the live stream thing. And then, keep in touch. Otherwise, after this is all over, you got to come out to Chicago sometime, and we'll be out on the East Coast eventually. And then I guess when we check back in for another episode, I'll explain to you the origins of the nickname Blind Adam.
Yeah, I totally didn't even ask that. Maybe can you?
Not important right now. It's a good cliffhanger.
Excellent. Well, that's what we'll have for the next episode. Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, man.
Yeah, thank you. Be well.
Take
care of yourself through this, and this delay is killing us.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Thanks for the call.
Hey, thanks for taking the time, man, and you stay safe as well, man.
All right, thanks, you too. Bye.
All right, bye. Thank you, Adam, for a wonderful conversation, for some excellent music recommendations, and for allowing me to hear your new record early. I really enjoyed it, and folks, I will keep you guys updated on when the new Blind Adam and the Federal League album will be released on AF Records, produced by Christos from Anti-Flag. I feel so cool that I get to talk about this stuff the way I do. That was a really great conversation, and I really related to Adam a lot. Solid dude. And I like talking to him. And he will be on the show again when the album is officially released. So that is our show for today, everybody. Thank you so much as always, but especially now, for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this and think you know someone else who might want to listen, we're available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can also get a free month of Stitcher Premium if you would like by signing up with the promo code AWESOME in all caps. That there's a lot of stuff to listen to on there, comedy albums, ad-free archives, extensive archives of Earwolf and Stitcher shows such as WTF with Mark Maron, Comedy Bang Bang, How Did This Get Made? There's a lot of stuff to be enjoyed there. And if you want to check out Blind Adam and the Federal League, they have an earlier EP release. I'll have links in the description as well. And I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support and hope you are doing well. If you guys want to check out anything I'm doing over on Patreon, it is patreon.com/awesomedisaster. I will have more stuff up there very soon. And thank you guys again for listening. I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, everybody.